So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please, the last of you, take your seat, finish your chats. Okay, I would like to welcome you all to this workshop in the e-infrastructure reflection group. For those of you who are not so familiar with what we do in this group, is that we inspire strategic debates on e-infrastructure across Europe. We deal with all types of e-infrastructure, and we deal with technical things, organizational things, and political things. And our business today is to touch upon some of the issues which we know are important for European e-infrastructure in terms of what is the right strategy. How should we invest in these different areas? And once one has answered this question, how should we then deal with each of these important pressing issues? How should we organize it? How should we finance it? And how should we prioritize? Today we will be hearing about some of these issues, not all of them. We will be touching upon some of the big questions about how do we measure the impact of all of these things we do? Does it have any effect at all when we work together on a European scale? Can we call it a success, or is it just something we postulate? We will see about a little about how is it financed and how do we measure the costs of these things. We will also look into the issues of public-private hosting. Where does the line go between what should be done in the academic world and what can be done in the commercial world? We will be listening to a few use cases. How is e-infrastructure provided and how should it be provided from the point of view of the people who we exist for? We shouldn't forget that the people who make e-infrastructure, like myself, only have the right to exist to the extent that somebody finds what we do useful. If not, then we should not exist. Our workshop will span the rest of today. Then there will be some dinner, and I forget now if it's today or tomorrow. This boat tomorrow, I think. Yeah. Today. Then there'll be a canal trip. I will participate somewhere here around Copenhagen. Let's hope it won't rain. It often does when we do those kind of things. Then we'll have a dinner, and then we will continue tomorrow, have new debates. One last thing before I give the word to our e-infrastructure reflection group chairman is that, so don't forget, the idea is that we want to provoke strategic debate. That means that it's very nice if we disagree. It's better if we can reach some consensus. But if we don't have a debate and we don't disagree, then we don't learn much. Okay? So first speaker is our dear chairman, Gudmund Høst, chairman for the e-infrastructure reflection group. Gudmund, the word is yours.
Thank you, Rune. So, I'll just continue where you ended, and did you turn this off? No, this is on. Welcome to the e-IRG workshop. So I'm Gudmund Høst, I'm chairman of the e-IRG, and I will, as I always do in these workshops, I will start by giving a brief introduction to the e-IRG for those who are newcomers to this forum. First of all, what is the context of e-IRG, the context that we work in? Well, the context is the European research area and the very important component, the underlying fabric of the era, which is the seamless online research area, how to create that. What is needed to create a European research area is to connect all these electronically available resources, from the synchrotron to the storage facilities to data from space, the libraries, to be able to connect with any device from anywhere and do this in the global context. Also to have the AAI structure, the equivalent of an electronic password. These are all elements of e-infrastructures that are the key building blocks of ERA. Some of the challenges for Europe in this area. Well, Europe consists of a lot of nations, a lot of countries, and this means that pan-European infrastructures need to cross multiple administrative and national domains. ICT is changing rapidly and continuously. That means that policies for sharing and accessing resources should keep pace with this technology development, and it needs to do this to stimulate European collaboration. Also, we see that the member state ministries and the Commission need qualified and consolidated advice, so advice which is really anchored in the member states. So here comes e-IRG with the mission to pave the way towards a general purpose European e-infrastructure. And the vision of e-IRG for the future is an open e-infrastructure enabling flexible cooperation and optimal use of all electronically available resources. This open part, the open infrastructure, open data, is now very much very much a hot topic, but this vision still was crafted back in 2008, so it's 4 years old. So we've been seeing the long trend for quite a while. So e-IRG, what is it? It was initiated in June 2003 in a workshop in Athens. So next year will be the 10-year anniversary of e-IRG, which will, of course, we will have a huge celebration. It has 2 delegates per country, and these are appointed by national governments. The governance structure is that we have a permanent chair, and the Troika rotates with the EU presidency. We try to reach consensus on all our recommendations. And this is important because it means that the recommendations, the documents that come out from e-IRG are firmly anchored in the member states. So, the target audiences are policymakers on the intergovernmental level and the governmental level, dealing with strategy and funding issues, also e-infrastructure service providers, research networks, computing data centers and projects, and also user communities, not only existing user communities, but also new ones. So community building is important in the context of e-IRG. Technology developers also follow our work quite closely. What are our products? We publish documents. So last year was the e-IRG white paper. It's a document that tries to summarize the state of the art when it comes to e-infrastructures. Then we also had a few shorter communications. So one was e-infrastructures in support of the digital agenda. Another one was e-IRG's reaction to the findings and recommendations of the report of the GÉANT expert group. So we reacted quickly on that and gave our recommendations for how to take this further. These documents you can find on the table over there. So what are we doing now? What are the sort of the hot topics, ongoing activities? We have some reports in the pipeline that I could mention. One is a task force report on cloud computing. Another one is a blue paper to ESFRI on data management for research infrastructures. So this is a report that we are writing in collaboration with ESFRI. So they have given us this task. Then there is another task force report on scientific software, which is also very much now in the making. And then we are working on the new roadmap, e-IRG roadmap, which hopefully will come out by the end of the year. I mentioned that the white paper is sort of summarizing state of the art on the infrastructures. The roadmap is a a future forward-looking document trying to see what or describe the new directions on the infrastructures. So we are also very much involved in consultations on Horizon 2020, new framework for program. So we've been doing that on networking, industry and innovation, data, human factors. Another and final activity that I will mention now is the work that we are doing on renewing the strategy of e-IRG. What should e-IRG do in the future? Roadmap, just mention briefly some topics that that we currently work on in the roadmap. How to advance the European infrastructures, integrating scientific and public data level. So very much taking into account this quest for openness, open science, open data. Then also intensifying the cooperation with stakeholders, how to engage the industry, how to engage users and link with the user communities. So these are some of the topics. I'll mention a few words on the future of e-IRG. The strategy that we are working on. And the new strategy of e-IRG will strengthen the major roles that we have. So we see that e-IRG has two major roles. One is the advisory body, being this advisor to stakeholders on the infrastructures. Another one is to be a coordination platform. Then there is one particular element of infrastructure that we also focus much on and have attention on, and that is the use and management of data. So the first one is the ambition is to become the main advisory body on infrastructures internationally, on all elements of infrastructures supporting the online era. And that means all elements means networking, distributed computing, HPC, all these things, but also on all aspects, on the governance, on the funding, innovation, sustainability. We intend to be more, in the future, more action-oriented, have also not only a reflective mode, but also a quick response mode, to be more agile. Then we need to continue to cultivate the S3 relationship and strengthen the support functions. So e-IRG is supported by a separate support program running the secretariat and other functions. Then the coordination platform. We intend to be a coordination platform for all European e-infrastructures with an open and transparent mode of operation, stimulating discussion, coordination, integration, again, on all elements of infrastructure, and for all stakeholders, all kinds of users, and all kinds of providers. So, for example, to strengthen this link between data producers and data factories, the providers of e-infrastructures, and the users, the researchers. So we want to work more forcefully towards integration of infrastructure elements, like you've seen in the response to the GAG report, to facilitate discussions, engaging users, bottlenecks, recommending directions, and stimulating development of advanced integrated services. So integrated services, advanced services for the user. Then when it comes to data, it's extremely important to elicit and cater for the needs of data-driven science, to stimulate this interaction between, again, producers, providers, users, coordinate and integrate the data critical elements, and also I think in the future to engage more data expertise within e-IRG, both as delegates and also as external also in external working groups. Yes, I will now wind up. The e-IRG workshops are organized by the current EU presidency. It's a sort of an autonomous event. So the current event is hosted and and hosted by Denmark. They have provided the program, and they wish very much to focus on strategy. So the overarching theme during these 2 days will be strategy. Now, what is strategy really? I looked up some definitions, and I picked out 2. So there's one military definition of strategy, the branch of military science dealing with military command and the planning and conduct of a war. So that's one possibility. I don't think it fits really well here. So I found an alternative definition from biology, from ecology, which is a complex of adaptations that appears to serve an important function in achieving evolutionary success. I think it fits a bit better in the current context, so I removed the first one, and I suggest that we stick to that. So what we could discuss during these 2 days are adaptations, or a complex of adaptations that might serve an important function in achieving some evolutionary success of e-infrastructures. Okay, maybe less ambitious, but it's also less aggressive, so I think it fits better in it. This is an open workshop. The e-IRG is an open workshop. Maybe you could also look at it as an open-ended workshop. And I would like to end my presentation by quoting the famous Danish author, Karen Blixen, who said that God made the world round so we would never be able to see too far down the road. Where I stand now, I cannot see too far down the road towards the end of this workshop, but I can at least see the next speaker, and I think there will be some very interesting developments during these 2 days. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Gudmund. So, our next speaker is, yeah, you have a question? Yes, of course. Yes, right, yes, I'm so sorry. How right you are.
So I'm just curious, there were 2 points you made in your presentation about advisory body and about open and transparent.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you rationalise open and transparent with the first delegates meeting? And who do you see as being the advisory body that you're advising when your delegates are, so that when your stakeholders are basically the delegates from the national representatives?
Okay, so open and closed. So we have an open forum, which is the workshop. Everybody can participate. Then we have some of our ordinary business to run, which I think is not all that interesting for the outsiders. We discuss every now and then whether to open up delegates meeting also for other stakeholders, and we do it occasionally. This is an ongoing debate, but to change that we would need to change the bylaws. We have not really come to the point yet where we have decided how to implement the new strategy, so we are now discussing it, and we will hopefully maybe we'll adopt the strategy in the delegates meeting in 2 days, and then we'll see how we implement it. You had one more question?
Well, your answer to the first one has confused me even more. So the strategy that you put up yet hasn't been adopted?
The strategy is still under discussion. So this is an example of the openness of e-IRG. So I'm now telling you about the strategy which is not yet adopted, so you can influence it by comments such as you just gave.
Okay, but the open and transparency may be withdrawn at the delegates meeting that happens on Wednesday.
It may not be.
It may not be adopted.
It might be adopted, yes. Yes, adopted, yes.
Perhaps I'll leave my second question until so you can carry on.
Okay, that was a question. Yeah.
Yeah, a bit similar question related to this advisory function. You were mentioning this quick response mode, which is, by my opinion, a bit alien to our way of operation, of habit and behavior. So we should at least be very careful with trying to introduce a quick response mode. This is not a typical solution to problems by us. We are thinking and trying to work out well-established and well-prepared solutions to the issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Any more questions? Comments? No? Well, then I would like to introduce the chairman of the board from the Danish e-science, e-infrastructure collaboration, which is a complete newly formed organization where I am now from. So my previous place, the Center for Scientific Computing, was merged into this together with the research network. We are very new, only a few months. We have a new board, and we probably have a new mission. Well, quite certainly we have a new mission. And the chairman of the board is Ove, sitting here, and he will tell you a little about the Danish landscape. Since you are now in Denmark, I thought it only appropriate that you should hear how we do things here and how we would like possibly to do it in the future. So,
thank you very much. I would also like to extend my welcome to you, to Denmark and to Copenhagen, and I hope it will be some very good and inspiring discussions here at the workshop. As René said in his introduction, I'm the chairman of the Danish e-infrastructure collaboration, which is a newly formed organization that is a merger of two existing organizations, and then on top of that, a new set of we call it mandate, with a new mandate about what we are supposed to do over the next coming years. And I would like to take you through that in the next minutes. As René said, we are very new. We were merged, or the idea about the merger came about a year ago, and we worked for some months to create the new organization. But due to the Danish election in November, the actual establishment of the organization was postponed. So in April this year, we were actually put into existence. We had the third official board meeting a little later, and we are now in the process of trying to maintain a stable service for existing customers and users, and at the same time to create a new strategy and a new mission and vision for the Danish e-infrastructure activities in Denmark. So, what do we do? One part of the organization is what's called the Danish Research Net, or Forskningsnettet in Danish. Was established in 1996, and it delivers high capacity network connections related to all Danish universities, to research institutions in a very broad sense. The interesting thing here is that the funding of this activity is based on investment support from the Danish government, but all the operating cost is covered by the participating institutions. And this is also the way it's going to happen in the future. It's a network organization. In principle, neither Forskningsnettet nor the new organization will have any employees. It's all based on outsourcing. There is a board, and everything is done by outsourcing. So the management is outsourced to the technical university. The operation of this is by UNICEF, and the WAVE, where you're from, activities is hosted by a group at the Danish Agency for Culture. And all in all, we have about probably 30 plus, it says 25, but we do have people also employed at the various universities that work part-time in getting this organization to work. So this is the one branch. The other part of the organization on which we built is the Danish Center for Scientific Computing. And it has been organized as a central coordinated administration and 5 decentralized operating centers actually run by the individual universities. So it was, again, a very virtual and non-hierarchical organization. It is based on a university-minister partnership, and the Danish Center for Scientific Computing had a board consisting of members from the universities and from industry. So these are the 2 pillars that is the basis for the new organization. We have created a temporary organization, which is the one that should carry us through the 2012 until we have the new strategy in place. And it's based on the 2 large pillars, and then the where you're from activities, single sign-on and identification services. What is the basis for creating the new organization? The basis for the new organization is a belief from the government that e-infrastructure and scientific computing is very important and will be even more important in the future. It is also the understanding and belief that scientific computing and e-infrastructure, more broadly defined, will be important not only in the user groups that we have seen so far, but it will move beyond that in the future. When I talk about our mandate, then you'll see that one of the issues that we have to deal with in the new organization is to bring scientific computing and e-infrastructure into all kinds of scientific research. This is particular with focus on humanities, social science, and other areas. So the idea is that there will be a new landscape where issues of big data will appear everywhere. I come from a research center where I'm director. It's called the Interdisciplinary Center for Organizational Architecture. And what we work with there is everything that can be designed in an organization. And when we look at business organization, we see that the amount of data that is available and the struggle you have to analyze data, find clusters and structures of customers, employees, the production, and so on. Usually I give one example from Denmark, and that is the Vestas Windmill Corporation. They have produced about 40,000 windmills. They have a service contract for about 25,000 windmills. They measure the operation of each windmill every 10 minutes. They're trying to optimize the location, the gearing, the braking of the windmill every time. And they do that being able to analyze the microclimate around each windmill. They have the largest computer in Denmark to analyze all these data. They've been able to increase the production of these windmills with more than 25%. So it's a business application, but you'll see lots of applications in humanities, social science, aside from physics and chemistry, where we've been used to see high-performance computing. So one of the things that we're going to deal with is to look into scientific computing more generally, computer simulation of the way organizations should be organized and run in the future is just a simple example outside simulating other types of activities. So our mandate is to make sure that what we do even better, and we support the current users even more. But we also have to break new grounds to get new users and to bring scientific computing and e-infrastructure into new areas of research. So again, these quotes are sort of just emphasizing the need for what we do even more. As the chairman said, you could not see very much down the road of this workshop. I think we may even be in a situation where we cannot see very much down the road with respect to the development and evolution of new technologies. And one of the challenges will also be how we integrate these new challenges of new technologies into what we do. One of the things that we have to deal with is at which level should we actually do what we are supposed to do. We can do it at the regional level, and we have our decentralized computing facilities. We could do it on the national level, and we have a whole series of national organizations. We could do it on the Nordic level. We are a part of experimenting with a high-performance computing facility at Iceland, together with Sweden, Norway, and Iceland. We have the European, and we have international collaboration and cooperation. And I think one of the challenges we have is how do we cooperate and how do we make these various parts of the system to work together. And we have to make a decision how we're going to allocate the funding that we have got into these various layers of collaboration. The funding of the Danish E-Infrastructure Center is based on three parts. It is user-driven payment of the network structure. It is annual budget for running the scientific computing organization and international collaboration. And it is an investment fund to invest in high-performance computing, cloud, and storage in various ways. As I said, we are part of also creating some virtuality with Compute on Iceland. And we have very decentralized structures, so we have both, and we have to get that to work. Again, we'll see many more instruments in all kinds of science that would need to deliver and provide data. We need to store data in a very different ways. So we have a number of challenges that we need to work with. Let me move on to say, based on all this, what is the new mandate for the Danish E-Infrastructure collaboration? And this is what we're supposed to do. We will be evaluated after 4 years and to see if we can live up to our new mandate. So, as I said, we have to continue what we have already done, and we have to do it better. And we have to initiate and develop new instruments to promote Danish e-science. I think the interesting part here is that we have to initiate and develop. And in our mandate, it has been stated very clearly that we have the responsibility to act proactive, in a proactive way with respect to setting these activities in motion. And we have to disseminate e-science to all forms and areas of research and educational activities. We also have to look into the proper public-private partnership. So in our mandate, in our regulation, we are allowed to get into public-private partnership. This is a new thing related to what we have done before. We also, and this turns out to be maybe the most important part of our new mandate, we have to provide training advisory activities proactively towards coordinate competence in the e-science area. So we need, and we have the responsibility to reach out to the users in the old areas and in the new areas. And we have to do that in a collaborative way with the existing system. We have to facilitate international collaboration. And we have to contribute to the coherence and synergy between research institutions, in the sense that we have to create synergy collaboration at all the levels that I showed before. And we have to find an appropriate sharing responsibilities between the national and local activities, so we have an efficient use of resources, but at the same time have to be very close to the user. If you look at this mandate, this is not easy. And we have to create a structure, an incentive system, with a set of rules, collaboration, to get this to work. But I think we all in the system realize that there is a very strong demand for this. And the first month has been very positive. Everyone in the system have said, well, we would like to work together to solve this. And I think if we do that, we can create something that is much better than what we had before, and we can utilize the budget and the funding in a very good way. The new mandate is based on a number of documents, and I think that is very important also, at least seen from a Danish perspective. The first document is an agreement between the university rectors and the Minister for Research that we should organize us this way, and this is the way we should operate. Then there is a document from the Minister of Finance that set out the rules and the financing. And finally, there is a document that set the legal and the rules for operation given from the Minister of Research, to which we refer. So we are in the process of creating a new organization. We take over two very good organizations. We will spend the rest of the year figuring out what is the landscape, and I look very much forward to read the documents you have. They will be instrumental in the way we will understand the world. By the end of September, we have to create a new strategy, and also decide the basis on which we want to be evaluated after 4 years. And based on that, we'll create a new organization, new incentives, new allocation of resources system, and then we'll be in full operation from January 1st. We see that as a very inspiring and a very interesting journey that we're just about to start, and we hope we'll be successful. And I think this workshop will give us a lot of inspiration in the way we'll create our new strategy. Thank you. Time for a few questions if you have some.
You mentioned the public-private partnership in your final slide. What sort of scope do you have in mind?
I don't know exactly what we have in mind, because I don't think we have the fantasy to think of what we will see down the road. Currently, we have a public-private partnership on the facility in Iceland. So that is the operation of the Nordic computer is done by a private company in collaboration with a university and several national bodies. So that is one possibility. Another possibility is whether there will be public-private partnership with respect to sharing data, do research, and in principle, we could, in the public system, deliver high-performance computer service to some companies or private activities, and vice versa. But it's yet to be seen. I think the interesting thing is that it has been clearly stated in the 3 documents that we are allowed to do that. So restriction has been taken away, and it's up to us to figure out exactly how much we're going to use that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next speaker, we'll be looking a little into the question of impact. So now that we have such huge investments nationally and in Europe, it is interesting to think that there is, of course, some degree of monopoly in all this. And if we would think of infrastructure like, for example, trains, harbors, airplanes, and so on, how does one actually measure if one system has any reasonable impact according to its raison d'être? Well, being a monopoly, it's quite difficult. Having different types of support programs in government sector and asking the question, does it work? Does it really solve what we set out to solve? Does it at all have any impact? If so, how do we measure it? A very interesting question indeed. So, welcome to Europe.
Thank you, René. Congratulations to our Danish host for the win against the Netherlands. My kids were born in the Netherlands and they were very unhappy about the result. So I lived in the Netherlands for 6 years working for Bell Laboratories, and in 2002 I joined GRNet, the Greek Research and Education Network. With some of you we have implemented in the past some major initiatives with regard to infrastructures, like the Southeast European Research and Education Network, if you wish, copying the NordUnet initiative and concept, a very successful project that managed to bring all this region close to the end. Similarly, we conceived the idea of sea grids, so a regional network of grids, again to bring up to speed countries close to the EGI initiatives. And later on, together with also some of you, we worked towards establishing a sustainable network and infrastructure in Southeast Europe that led to Sea Light. This is a dark fiber network in Southeast Europe. Gudmund mentioned about 2003, about the starting of the e-IRG, and I was one of those founding members, together with some colleagues here, Fotis and others. We actually conceived the need of this group, of this body, and supported Mario Campolargo and Kyriakos Baxevanidis in this respect. Some of you might have seen this document actually that set the grounds to the e-IRG. I was also the national representative in Terena, in CNET, and was for 2 years the national expert for Framework Program 6 in the infrastructures. And additionally, I participated in 2006 in the Esprit roadmap, and where we conceived the need for the supercomputing facility for Europe, that today is called PRAISE. Since then, I left GRNet in 2006, but in 2006 I was asked by Terena to support their study. And in this study I supported the geographic study, actually a type to see the digital divide in Europe, to find the indicators that are needed to measure all this. And this was actually the starting point of what I'm going to present today. In 2007, I moved away, and I'm moving in a, as you know, in Greece, in a very difficult situation today, with a major project trying to underpin innovation and entrepreneurship in the country, one of the biggest programs in the country in this respect, called Coralia. So currently I am in the advisory board of the European Cluster Observatory, something similar to what I'm going to present to you, but is dealing with innovation in Europe. And as you, of course, very well know, EU policy and financial support to infrastructure has been up to now in the global front. This reaffirms the priority both of the member states as well as the European Commission, that places on research as the foundation for European competitiveness. Yet, design and implementing improved policies and strategies require better knowledge on the status of infrastructures development at global, regional and country level, including evolution over time, as well as scientific, social and economic impact due to their use by individuals, communities and people. In June 2009, in the proceedings of the workshop Role of Research Infrastructure for a Competitive Knowledge Economy, in S3 it was mentioned that also there is some material from impact studies available. This is mainly of an anecdotal nature, and time might have come to provide more sophisticated evidence. In September 2009, the study that was performed for the DG Research and DG IMSO on the evaluation of pertinence and impact of community support for research infrastructure in the 6th Framework Programme, it was recommended that concrete impact measures based on sound evaluation of existing and potential data sources are developed, and this includes establishing a set of indicators for which comparable time series data can be collected. This will provide more specific and measurable impacts, moving away from opinion-based indicators. This will enable impacts to be measured and evaluated more accurately over time. In 2010, the Council of the European Union invited the Member States and stakeholders to further monitor the digital and ICT-related performance through indicators and scoreboard. Already some actions in this respect have taken place, like the observatory by Commissioner Cruz. In November 2010, in the in-consultation meeting and the session of socioeconomic evaluation of infrastructure, it was mentioned that all infrastructure projects should develop a common understanding about evaluation and impact assessment, openly discuss the methodology, agree on indicators and data sources, and contribute to the build-up of the evaluation framework. Also from this meeting, it was mentioned that the public at large is not aware of the electronic infrastructures, as they don't have access and therefore don't know about it. And if one wants to touch them, data has to be related to the real world scenario. Impact assessment would have an impact on the public at large if used as a method to foster European pride. Very recently, on February 2010, the European Commission received one study delivered by the Research Impact Study, where some of the results of this study were that a periodic project-based assessment that can be aggregated at overall program level is necessary. A holistic approach and supporting tools are still missing, able to monitor infrastructure impacts and trends at EU and member state level. We need to utilize factual and unbiased metrics and data without subjective interpretations. We need to apply a validation creation process to ensure that the utilized data accurately represent the infrastructure status quo. And we need to take into account owners, users, sponsors of infrastructure at both EU and national level. Currently, and actually since many years now, there are quite a few initiatives that try to develop and maintain international databases and repositories for infrastructure-related components. Most of you know very well the Anterena Compendium, the e-IRG knowledge base, the C-Engine knowledge base, a new project that is developing another repository, the EuroRISNet Plus Knowledge Repository, the EGI.eu databases, the top 500 list of supercomputers, etc. Additionally to that, a few projects are running currently, like Arena Plus, eFiscal, that has a presentation after this one, and the Research Infrastructure Impact Study that was delivered 2 months ago. Some other initiatives are also around. The vision of the inventory project was to establish the European Infrastructure Observatory, an online single-entry project platform for all infrastructures, offering interactive, user-driven visualization tools, and an extensive set of benchmarking indicators, initially addressing Europe, but also with a capacity to be expandable worldwide, in order to facilitate multi-dimensional and polymorphic monitoring and analysis, support fact-based policy and learning, and disseminate achievements of infrastructures in Europe and beyond. The current status is that today we are actually opening up this service to the infrastructure community. It offers 7 intuitive, interactive, user-friendly visualization tools. It features a core set of more than 45 benchmarking indicators that are the baseline for monitoring infrastructure development. It provides access to more than 10,000 individual figures and consolidates more than 18 months of stakeholders' feedback and consensus. The inventory project had an advisory board to receive a major consensus. Professor Vasilis Mangles, the RMPC chairman, Karel Fix, the general secretary of Terena, Alexander Belic, ex-minister and currently the director of a supercomputing facility in Serbia, Professor Hans Hegering, chairman of the Association of Supercomputing in Germany, Bob Jones, director of the e-IRG projects, Thibaut Leroux from the European Science Foundation to take the feedback from the researchers, Norman Wiseman from JISC in the UK to get the feedback from the funding bodies, and John Martin and Robin Arak, that most of you know them from their participation in evaluation of most of the activities in this domain. Additionally, we were in collaboration and tried to receive also feedback and get input and data from most of the infrastructure projects and policy bodies, including ZEAN, Dante, Terena, EGI Inspire, EGI.eu, PRAISE, e-IRG. A targeted dissemination activity also took place in November 2011, where we took a lot of feedback, and we also did an extensive usability evaluation of the platform. As it regards the numerical indicators that you are able to access through the service, you get performance and capacity indicators that are actually answering the question, what are we getting from what we pay? For the network infrastructure, supercomputing infrastructure, and grid infrastructures, a set of indicators have been extensively discussed, defined, and data has been collected. As it regards usage and utilization, answering the question how many users are utilizing and accessing it, user indicators have been also here defined and collected. And as it regards cost and budget, how much have we paid for it, also indicators have been defined, but still in a couple of the infrastructure, this figure is difficult still to get. Additional indicators to show scientific impact, as well as indicators that are related to infrastructures from the digital agenda or Horizon to 2020 have been also incorporated in the infrastructure. And as always happens with observatories like this, supporting indicators like the GDP or the GDP per capita or population and surface are also included in the site so as to make interesting cross correlations. Apart from the numerical indicators, you get also access to non-numerical indicators. 3 services are there in order to show what was mentioned before, this European pride. So what has been achieved in Europe in the last 20 years in this respect, as it regards the stakeholders mapping and the structuring effect that has been achieved with the NRENs, NGIs, supercomputing centers and now associations at some country levels, as well as the significant impact that coordinating entities like EGI.eu, Dante, Terena, PRAISE, research infrastructure is bringing into this domain. Furthermore, pan-European networks are shown like the ZEAN network backbone links, cross-border fiber connections, and a few others are coming. Last but not least, the chronology service showing the major milestones of development in this sector, the establishment of NRENs, NGI, supercomputers, major projects in this domain, and many other milestones that some of you have participated a long time ago and recently. As I said, today we are actually launching this. We have prepared a small video for you. After the video, I will come and present what is the way forward for the e-IRG, for this project, and for the indicators and impact assessment in general.
building block for the online European research area. EU policy and financial support to electronic infrastructures has been and continues to be at the global forefront by any international standard, reaffirming the priority that Member States place on research as the foundation of European competitiveness. The contribution of electronic infrastructures in supporting those policies, European targets and flagship initiatives is indisputable. Yet, designing and implementing improved policies and strategies requires better knowledge of the status of electronic infrastructure development at global, regional and country level, including evolution over time, as well as scientific, social and economic impact due to their use by individuals, communities and people. Responding to the electronic infrastructure's community's need, the Inventory Project has established the foundations for the formation of the European e-Infrastructures Observatory, an online platform offering interactive, user-friendly visualization tools and an extensive set of benchmarking indicators to facilitate multidimensional and polymorphic monitoring and analysis, support fact-based policy and learning, and disseminate achievements of electronic infrastructures in Europe and beyond. The European e-Infrastructures Observatory is open to everyone, free of charge, and requires no registration. New services and visualizations are first tested within a small group of key stakeholders until they become sufficiently stable for wide-scale deployment. The European e-Infrastructures Observatory offers an advanced set of monitoring and dissemination tools, eagle-eye mapping overviews of organizations actively involved in developing e-infrastructures in Europe, graphics with evolving interconnections of scientific communities, geographic and regional mappings, time series graphs, column and bar charts, line charts, bubble charts, scatter plots, hierarchically structured representations, timelines of major events in the history of e-infrastructures, success stories, custom-built composite indices, overall developments and trends, and many more. Stakeholders mapping. The Stakeholders Mapping Service gives access to an eagle-eye mapping overview of the organizations established and actively involved in developing electronic infrastructures all over Europe. Coordinating organizations, national research and education networks, national grid initiatives, and supercomputing centers. Detailed information is available for each organization. The service supports visual cues that are distinguishable by the user with color vision deficiencies. Pan-European networks. The Pan-European Networks is a graphical service that portrays with intuitive visualization elements the interconnections of scientific communities in Europe. It is possible to see how these relations and networks evolve over time with the playback option. Chronology. The chronology is a timeline of major events in the history of electronic infrastructures in Europe, colored by type and theme, representing milestones, major projects, the establishment of organizations, the installation of apparatuses, and more. Indicators on maps. The Indicators on Map service is a key service enabling the display of the observatory indicators on geographical regions across Europe. Time transition options are available as well as an extensive set of fully customized tools and attributes. Trends. With the Trend service, it is possible to portray indicators on time series index graphs, column and bar charts, and scatter plots. Particular indicators in countries and observed trends can be selected, while export options are available both for the graphs and in contained values. Tree maps. The tree map service is a spatial, non-geographical map service for displaying indicators that are hierarchically structured as a set of nested rectangles. This visualization service is particularly well suited for high-performance and grid computing capacity indicators. Empower international cooperation of e-infrastructure organizations and individuals. Become a unique dissemination platform of European success stories and new initiatives. The European E-Infrastructures Observatory can be found at www.enventuri.eu or www.e-observatory.eu.
Okay, come back with this. So now the thing is how to bring this forward. I will skip some of the slides here since you can visit actually the service and get a view of the things that are there. We have prepared a white paper for the e-IRG that we will be submitting officially after the meeting for you to consider with the challenges and future steps to take this forward. So in order to look into the future, first let's see a bit about the challenges. What we need is a periodic project-based assessment that can be aggregated at an overall EU program level, a holistic approach for consistently applying data validation and curation in order to ensure that the collected data accurately represent the infrastructure status quo, since currently in most databases data is submitted or collected by the infrastructure providers. We need a set of data points that will enable to cover regions beyond the EU. Especially of interest for us is countries that Europe is competing with, like the United States, Japan, China, Russia, etc., but also regions where Europe has invested a lot. We need a set of indicators and benchmarks to monitor emerging infrastructure like data infrastructures, cloud, as well as other areas of interest. We need, furthermore, a universal framework for monitoring infrastructure impacts and trends at EU member state level and even regional level in some cases, so that we can capture macroscopic socioeconomic indicators. And we further, and I think that Gudmund also mentioned something similar to that in the e-IRG strategy, a kind of a collaboration framework, so a platform that could allow researchers, providers, policymakers to collaborate and move forward this infrastructure further. Coming now to the status of the indicators and the databases and observatories on the different infrastructure areas, we know, most of us know that as it regards the networking side, matters are quite well addressed owing to the maturity that has been reached all over the years for NRENs after a sufficient period of time and consecutive series of flagship EU projects, coupled of course with the existence of the two coordinating bodies, DANT and Terena, and especially the ZEAN-Terena compendium that is responsible for a substantial amount of available indicators that exhibit a high degree of reliability in terms of time span and geographical coverage. As it regards the grid computing side, things seems to be on a transitional period with several sources of data available containing a significant range of indicators, data and statistics, but sometimes lacking consistency in terms of time span and geographical coverage. This, of course, compared to what we can find in the Terrain compendium. A one-stop shop convergence seems to be moving forward and expected to take place soon through the EGI.eu and EGI-inspired projects. This will lead towards a single quantitative and qualitative point of reference for grid progress monitoring. On the supercomputing side, the respective data aggregation framework is still at its early stages as far as the EU-hosted initiative is concerned. Most of the supercomputing people here know that there is, of course, a significant database, the top 500.org list, where they can find most of the data needed, but still we don't have a European initiative here. On the other side, the indicators for supercomputers are quite mature. We know what they are. In this respect, again, the PRAISE project, as well as the PRAISE infrastructures, seems to be the place where this coordination will happen. On the other emerging infrastructures, like data or cloud, both data aggregation as well as appropriate indicators are at their infancy. So we need to do a lot of work here. Moving forward, and as we state in this white paper, we believe that first the Commission and the infrastructure policy bodies shall explore the possibilities to support a holistic framework for monitoring infrastructure development, capitalizing on what we have presented today. We need first to cover global regions of interest, second, address emerging infrastructures, third, standardize and automate data harvesting so as to the update happens as new data becomes available at the data source, and deploy additional visualization tools and techniques, especially for the new type of infrastructure that we need to cover. The Commission should also facilitate the consultation and consensus process at a global level. We need to bring colleagues working on these same topics from the United States, Russia, Japan, China, Australia. Some of them have already expressed their support for this European initiative, the European Infrastructure Observatory. The running flagship infrastructure initiatives and projects should strengthen the collection and aggregation of data values for the selected indicators. And since they are actually the structuring bodies, together with the NRENs, the NGIs, and the supercomputing associations, they are the way to collect the data. The Commission and the national governments should pursue a holistic approach for consistently applying data validation and curation. As we said, data is collected, but we need to curate and we need to validate the data. Furthermore, the Commission should ensure that the future flagship infrastructure initiative and projects incorporate into their plan the appropriate monitoring and assessment procedures according to indicators that are now available and we know about them. And wherever this is not included in the proposal, this should be included in the negotiation phase. The Commission should also pursue in close collaboration with the national governments the efforts to support and maintain partly the European Infrastructure Observatory. And last, major infrastructure stakeholders should facilitate, in close cooperation with the European coordinating organization and national bodies, the collection of indicators in two additional emerging and very important aspects that have been put forward by the funding bodies, and they are sustainability and human capacity. Today I call the members of the e-IRG first to use the European Infrastructure Observatory and provide any feedback on the website of the observatory, and whenever the white papers comes to the e-IRG to provide feedback on this Copenhagen Infrastructure Observatory white paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's hope we in the future measure our impact, if at all. Any questions to the subject of measuring impact? No?
I
Yeah.
would have one.
Yeah.
Have you
Okay.
considered?
Yeah, that's okay. Oh, you first.
Have you considered sort of synergies with the science talk? Because in a way, I like the fact that you have this sort of very sort of neutral information available and so on. But I think also one of the motivating factors to actually keep it up to date is that people who are sort of generally heard the buzzword today and they go and see, okay, what might be the cloud and so on, they would actually enter to the site. So.
Yes. Certainly, as I mentioned, there are many initiatives currently going on, and first of all, there is a need for a synergy of all those initiatives in a European initiative to tackle this issue, if you wish, once and for all.
Yeah, it's not an easy task. Yes.
Congratulations, this is really an impressive demonstration. One question, are you already somehow, how does the data feed into this system at the moment? I mean, you've developed really outstanding visualization tools, I think. And I think that probably one of the recommendations that you're making is to get better integration to existing sources of information. I mean, just your feedback is interesting.
Yes, Valentino, as I mentioned, and in collaboration also with Karel, we have managed to integrate some of the data that you for many years are collecting, and very valuable data for the networking infrastructure. In a similar way, this has happened with e-IRG and for the supercomputing side. The main purpose of this project, the inventory project, was not the collection of the data, was to show that it's feasible to have a tool that all of us can use whenever we need fact-based data to support our everyday work. Either it is lobbying or comparing or whatever you need when you do your work. As I mentioned, there is a need for the data, first of all, to have, if you wish, at the structuring bodies today in Europe, to emphasize further on that, to have a common approach, and on the other side, the European Commission and national governments should work on the curation and validation, because this is something that has to happen from a neutral body to the people that are actually developing or running the infrastructures.
Okay, just here, Gudrun first.
Thanks for a very interesting presentation. I was wondering, so what are really the incentives for people to provide data into this this database, and how do you deal with a possible selection bias? I mean, you could maybe imagine that those who provide the data are those who are sort of best in class in some sense, and those that feel like this, oh, they're not really very proud of what they're doing or something, that they don't provide the data. Mm-hmm. So this could possibly be some, you could get some bias in that respect. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, as it regards, we didn't collect the data, we collected the data from the actual owners of them, for Terenas, Top 500, e-IRG. For each one of them, there is a different purpose. But we need to establish a common purpose for all. There is a need for data in order to see where we're going. Not to compare between countries. That's why we develop the other visualization, to see where we are all going together. But also to see the holes in this development, so the digital divide, to see what is missing. All of us to understand that there is a need for a framework to put a strategy. And to put a strategy, you need a fact-based evidence of where you are. This is something that this community is lacking. So we don't need it to compare. We needed to say that Europe is one of the regions in the world that has established one of the best infrastructures in the world. The ANT, e-IRG, praise. They are moving forward. So this is what we need, and I believe that one of the side effects of the observatory is also to let know the people, the common people, the person about what we are doing in this room, what are we developing for the researchers and for their future.
Okay, final question here.
Oh, I was wondering just, are you familiar with e-IRG knowledge base?
Yes, I am.
And did you try to connect those? The problem with e-IRG knowledge base or such initiatives are that they are very static and out of date, and they disappear if there is no money. So what will happen with your project if there will be no funding for this project? It will disappear, or?
Well, I am personally committed to keep this as a person, but this is not a personal matter. The European Commission and the national governments, they need this, we need this, so we need to find a way that such a framework is kept alive in a very similar way that this is kept alive in other sectors that I am participating. So I have a plan, of course in coordination with the e-IRG, in coordination with all the running projects at the moment, to set up something that will keep this sustainable for the future. From one point of view, some people say that public funding is significant for this type of initiatives because this needs to be neutral. But from the other side, we need also to work on a more sustainable approach, and this is something that we are discussing at the moment. And hopefully very soon we will be in position to discuss with all of you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so measuring impact is not easy, and it is certainly not just asking people, do you have a good impact? So it's complicated, but efforts are made. Now the next question is, since we don't really know if we have any impact, the question is, do we really know what things cost?
Thank you. So actually, first off, I'd like to introduce Sandra Cohen, who's the resident accounting expert. So any complex question related to the models and so on, I will pass on to her.
Responsibility.
Yeah, also that, most importantly. So as many of you who have worked with me know that I'm a very simple person. So when I first heard about this cost assessment, I really liked the idea, because essentially it sounded like that we do cost assessment and compare this cost of e-infrastructure with the cloud. So essentially we take two numbers, and one of them actually is already published, actually heavily promoted, so the cost of the cloud. So since I'm standing here, I guess it's sort of one of the indicators that it was a little bit more complicated. So just sort of looking a little bit into the starting point. So of course the cloud and sort of the development of the commodity computing, I think those were, I would say, the catalyst for the need for this cost assessment and so on. But as the previous presentation showed, we are also doing quite a lot of investments. So it's sort of inevitable that once the scale grows, people start to ask questions that how much do we actually spend on this? So then comparing with this commercially available comparison, so we did a literature search, and more or less what we came up with was that at the maximum a cloud solution would cost about 7 times what it costs to actually sort of maintain your own resources. At the minimum, there were basically some reports that you get very close to the one-to-one relationship in terms of the cost. And I think one of the explaining factors here is that most of the, let's say, cloud hype or cloud promotion is based on the assumption that you actually don't use your resources at that much. You might have a desktop computer running at 5% of the time, or your small cluster that is sort of in 20-30% used. And of course, in this case, just paying for what you use, it actually sounds quite interesting. But this is, for the e-infrastructure, these are actually systems that are running at quite high rates, definitely sort of over 50% clearly. And in this case, what we have found is that they have hinted that you might in certain cases be able to save money, but nobody actually has shown the numbers. And this is more or less where we are with the sort of very initial results of this survey. So we are sort of closer to the lower end of the ratio in these sort of very initial numbers, but in terms of the comparing to what has been reported in literature, it's sort of very much aligned. So then, again, sort of simple question in a way that, okay, how hard could it actually be to get better numbers? I mean, after all, it's measuring costs at the face of it. It's very simple. You just sort of see how much you're spending, and then you sort of budget a little bit for the what you need in the future. Also, sort of comparison is quite easy because in most cases we have heard that, okay, depth of the distance and so on doesn't really matter where your resources are, and CPU hour is a CPU hour. And of course, we are talking about a field that is starting to mature, so we can sort of assume that immediately tomorrow there's no major surprises. So if we forget IT for a while and let's take another field that is fairly well established, so actually living in a house. And if we sort of assume that there's somebody sort of promoting this life as a service offering, so basically you get everything in your house virtualized in a sense that you go in any town, you kind of like an office hotel, and you do everything. You have everything ready made for you. And you want to compare the cost of this solution to actually sort of in-housing housing solutions, so basically living at home. Of course, there are sort of other benefits in addition to the cost, so I guess some of the younger people in the audience might have a lifestyle that actually sort of might benefit in this sort of flexibility of being able to sort of just check in any town and so on, so optimizing your commuting and so on. Also, comparison should be very easy because we have actually been paying for our housing for hundreds of years in most of the countries, so this should be very easy to compare. So first step, let's track how much we are spending on housing. So let's do a poll and start asking that, okay, what is your weekly housing cost? And of course the first stumbling block is that the people will say, who wants to know? Why? There's sort of confidentiality, privacy issues there, so you have lots of resistance in this kind of questions. Then even individual person, they tend to have tens of funding sources per person, so basically you would need to track quite a lot of accounts to kind of keep track of this. Then you start to run into even more problems, like how to deal with the gifts or consumer goods. Somebody might get their rent paid by the employer and so on. Historical data, so you have a table from the 1920s, so this was quite interesting fact. So 10 pounds in 1920, if you adjust it for inflation or purchasing power, it ends up being 300 or 900 today. And this is more or less what in accounting terms is a challenge with the full cost accounting. So you need to know all the inputs to the system, and you need to really carefully observe how much money you are spending onto something. And there's also the inherent problem. So for example, you include costs that wouldn't repeat. So today you wouldn't repeat your VHS player, most likely, unless you're a collector, which is sort of a whole another thing. So this is basically the way I understood that, okay, the full cost accounting, it has certain issues. Then looking into the future, predicting tends to be difficult, especially if we are talking about the future. So do we know if our fridge will break down next week or not, or will it be a year from now and so on? Energy costs are actually starting to be interesting. I think this is the common thing with housing and IT. We are in a situation where we have increasing demand, diminishing supply, and usually when these things happen, you start to have quite interesting market phenomena. Legal frameworks, they tend to sort of come into play too. And for these reasons, it's very easy to either over or underestimate what you're going to spend. And this is the basic problem of the total cost of ownership analysis. So you're building a computing center today, and 40 years from now, how much it is actually going to cost to dismantle or convert it into some other uses. And these are sort of they require certain sort of educated guesses in a way. Of course, this sort of CPU is a CPU. We have also the same thing with the house. So we have very different solution to the housing situation. So so basically, we might need to take other factors than just plain cost into account. So to summarize this sort of challenge, which is sort of the inherent challenge in this kind of exercise. So it's not easy to track the cost or predict them. Comparison is not trivial, so actually we sort of noticed that it's not just two numbers, we need at least four. So we need to have cost for HPC infrastructures, and then we need to have the cost for HPC solution on the cloud, and then HTC and HTC cloud. And then of course the future is sort of has some uncertainties. Of course the prices will drop, but this is sort of again question mark that okay, if the cost base changes, so there was a single flood in Thailand and suddenly for a while we were paying double price for our hard drives and so on. And again, regulations and technologies that develop. So what the project actually did, in a way tried to do a little bit of a shortcut. So instead of tracking the cost that happened in the past or predicting what they happen in the future, did a sort of a mapping exercise. So let's see how much stuff is out there, how many computers are out there, and we sort of try to sort of estimate that okay, if we bought this capacity today, how much we would need to spend, and this is the way that we actually could avoid some of the effort that goes into the survey data. So we could actually have the capital expenditure, we could estimate it based on the existing hardware, and would focus on the operational expenses. And of course the benefit with ICT is that we're building, when it gets old, it actually becomes historic and valuable, whereas computer, they tend to be recycling challenges. But in a nutshell, we didn't need to have access to everyone's bank accounts, and we didn't really need to have a crystal ball, which another way of saying this same thing is basically looking into the full cost accounting on top, which is basically really looking way into the past, and then the total cost of ownership, which is sort of looking very much into the future, and then we have this annual cost as assumption, which is more or less see what is actually being used today, and we sort of look into to maintain the steady state, that we maintain the same amount of resources. How much money do we need to, for example, next year? And I think for certain budgeting purposes, this kind of information is actually quite useful. It's sort of certainly maybe easier to justify in a way, because this is sort of seems to be that it's based on harder data. This is maybe sort of more on this sort of again differences between housing and similarities between housing and ICT. So some of the technologies, they change very rapidly, and also actually the use patterns, they change actually. As we saw in the previous presentation, the number of users and so on, it's growing at very rapid pace. But then certain basics, they are kind of hold us back in a way that we have the energy needs. Usually we need at least containers for the computers and so on. And speed of light for certain HPC applications is a bit of a pesky law. So the project that I'm representing, we actually did three things. So as we said, we needed to look what other people are saying. So we did a state-of-the-art survey, and we actually turned this also into something that is a way to engage with the experts. So we actually are publishing these state-of-the-art papers, and so there's on a website you can actually see there's a list of papers and a short summary of the paper, and this has been actually quite successful in actually engaging with the authors of these papers. So we are actually getting suggestions for new papers to include there. Then we did a benchmarking effort, which was very small scale in a way, a sanity check. I would say that maybe one of the biggest bonuses of this was that we got the technical people and the financial people to look at the same problem in a way that there was a sort of common ground. And I think a lot of these sort of HTC, HPC definitions we run into, we actually noticed that at least sort of the most obvious sources, so let's say Wikipedia, if you go there and you look into what is HTC, you actually don't get really useful definitions. So we actually needed to sort of spend quite a lot of time in discussing about this, that how we avoid that we are not comparing apples with oranges. And then the actual survey execution. So there was quite a lot of design work and many discussions about what is the necessary level of detail to actually submit so that we can actually provide useful, robust numbers and so on. So it was a bit of a sort of financial and technical challenge, but I think in the end the results have been quite good. We have gotten already enough material that we can sort of give some initial results. So just sort of running through quickly the state of the art. So the more or less the sources for some of the numbers in the first slide. So this was the first Magellan report was looking into the HPC centers in the Department of Energy and found this sort of 3 to 7 times price difference, which sort of favored the dedicated infrastructure. Also sort of slightly different approaches to this sort of maybe sort of halfway house between the dedicated system and the cloud, which was this sort of community cluster program, and there at least the sort of based on this sort of flat fee shared ownership system, they noted that most of the users got substantially lower cost in this using this community system. Another, which was a UK study, and they got slightly lower numbers, so basically 1.5 to 2 times cost if you actually migrated everything to the cloud, and they were sort of making this hints that maybe using reserved instances you could actually get to the same level or even sort of get some savings. I don't know actually what were the utilization rates used in this, do you remember?
They are different between different cases, so they start from 60% to 80%. You can find all this in the appendix of the report. Okay.
And then also quite interesting qualitative analysis, which actually sort of maybe bridges the cost and impact in a way of looking at what are the strengths and weaknesses of the cloud and so on. So then the benchmarking effort, it was quite minimal, looking into a couple of nodes on a supercomputing and using these cluster instances on Amazon, and more or less got this 37 to 48% performance drop from going from the dedicated system to the cloud. And of course, you can explain some of this with having different hardware and different networking solutions and so on, but and maybe some performance tuning could improve this, but also this performance tuning means that it's an effort that somebody must do, so it's sort of something to keep in mind. So then the actual survey, there were total so far 26 answers, and they cover quite nicely most of the Europe in terms of the countries. And then jumping into probably the most interesting numbers, which is the last line on this table, which is the cost per logical CPU hour, and I think there are a couple of interesting things there. So the big difference between the average and median numbers, which actually indicate that there are sort of outliers where we actually need to go back and look into what explains this, that some of these sites report much higher cost than sort of than are typical. But also both the average and median cost, even in 1 year, you can see quite clear drop, so about 50%, so which is actually kind of surprising in a way. So, as I said, we shouldn't be compared to the cloud today, because we are talking about 2010, 2011 cost and comparing them with prices today. But just sort of digging up, if we take a standard instance, which is basically a little bit less capacity than a typical HTC CPU, you have about, at the lowest, 0.025 if you actually make the commitment to use the system for 3 years. But then on-demand instances are very much in line with what are sort of, let's say, between average and median values. And then actually, if you need to run slightly larger programs, you actually need to double these EC2 costs. In terms of cost breakdown, the interesting thing there is that the operational costs seem to dominate. So in 2010 and 2011 both, they were sort of about 2/3 of the total cost. Electricity consumption, I think the efficiency was reported as quite good. So actually, keeping the computers cool and so on, there was only 50% extra on top of what is needed to actually do the computing. One interesting thing was the depreciation rate. So most of the survey respondents, they reported that they would use CPUs and so on for 5 years. So this is a question that we will need to come back and see what if this is really the truth. In 2011, you can see quite a clear drop in the, if you measure the personal cost per logical CPU hour, so you can see the impact of the multi-core technology. And there was also one of these sort of interesting facts was that at least one of the papers indicated that you wouldn't eliminate system administration tasks if you move to the cloud. So it sort of seems to sort of show that let's say in terms of pure cost, the infrastructure is quite competitive. So to conclude, both the cost of the dedicated systems, they are going down, as well as the prices of the cloud services, not quite at the Moore's law pace, but sort of close. And of course, here we have to sort of emphasize that we are comparing the costs with pricing. So basically, we don't know what is sort of the strategy of the cloud providers. Are they actually operating at very small margins, or maybe even negative margins, applying some kind of loss leader tactic? So this is something to keep in mind in the comparison purposes. Also, sort of in addition to the pure cost, I think this is not the only factor. I think you can make arguments for both dedicated and cloud systems for their convenience, flexibility, let's say intangible factors, because on the other hand, people like to have a box that they can touch that, okay, this is where my computing happens. On the other hand, of course, being able to do things on the cloud is something that is a very marketable skill. So that's again, there's sort of you can make argument for both. But when you have non-standard requirements, then obviously that often requires that you have to actually acquire hardware to manage that. Both have sort of risk management issues there and so on. Then looking at this sort of cost assessment process, it was painful. It more or less inherently means lots of work and sort of reminding people that could you please fill in the data and so on. I think also sort of more and more I look into this, I think it's sort of essential, not necessarily to come up with these 2 or 4 numbers, but it actually provides insights into how the system operates and so on. So looking at the challenges, I think we can put them into 3 categories. I think there's the fundamental uncertainty of the costs, and this is partially addressed by the methodology developed by the project. Gathering sufficient data rapidly and efficiently. This is, I think, very much an issue for the service provider community. So actually sort of being sensitive how the sufficient data changes, what is the level of transparency that are demanded by the stakeholders and so on. So finding a trusted party that people feel comfortable to actually send information that sometimes feels confidential or is actually sort of legally confidential. That's probably one of these sort of challenges to address. Then using this data for policy formation, and I think this is very much the tie-in to the impact assessment. So there, first of all, the users and funding agencies, they need to trust the numbers. Then the numbers need to be made relevant. So I think fundamentally most of the funding agencies don't really care about number of CPU hours, but if you sort of somehow make the link with the number of Nobel Prizes, I think they sort of listen in a completely different way. And I think here sort of e-IRG would have a very, very important role to play. And in addition to, after this presentation and during the dinner, the next opportunity to continue discussion is the e-Fiscal Summer Workshop, which is early next month in the island of Samos, which is, I think, being held in Greece. It's also very appropriate for doing financial analysis and so on, I have to say. Sorry. So, thank you. Any questions, comments?
a question over here. Maybe we have 2 microphones.
You have a strong focus on compute resources. Are data in your focus too? For example, for many communities, digital archives are of increasing importance.
At the moment, the data is outside of focus, but I think it's a sort of known gap. I think more or less when the project was planned, the sort of data as a sort of separate independent entity wasn't really so high up in the agenda. So the decision was to start with the, let's say, services that were fairly well established and mature.
Thank you, Matti, and thank you the previous speaker as well. I didn't have the opportunity. I woke up a bit later, and René disqualified my question at the stage. But I have a couple of comments which partially deals with this subject, which is of course extremely important. But one of the things which is still unclear to me a bit is why are we collecting these numbers? I mean, who is supposed to do something based on this? This doesn't mean that I'm against this collection. It's the challenge here, because more as a comment for the previous speaker, that we have several examples. I think, Ivan, you were indicating a bit on the direction where we have had several projects looking into putting up these databases, and they have just evaporated when the project has finished. And we have, if we have a decision, I don't know where, to collect these numbers, which I think are important, we must have a structure which is more sustainable. And then we also have to have a structure, I mean, who is going to use these numbers and for what? And this is totally unclear to me. But still, I think this is a very, very important, but I would still like to know exactly, I mean, where are we going with these numbers? Thank you.
Maybe more a question for Gudmund than for the project. Well, why are we collecting this? Do you have a bit for answering this?
So basically, I guess in a way I could take the easy way out, and I think we were essentially funded to as a pilot project to see if to what degree finding the information is feasible, and I think in a way how to make this sustainable and how to give other people to the chance to make friends like we did. It's sort of maybe something that definitely for the e-IRG to discuss.
Can I just a short? I think because this is a weakness of the I think this is a weakness of the Commission in a way, because I think if the Commission finances these projects, it should follow up these numbers in one or another way. And now I have the feeling that the projects pop up, they disappear, and there is really no trace afterwards. Okay, but now I can see the ever-going man Steven.
I think the Commission finances many projects which indeed are institutions. This might in future be one of them.
But I think this is missing the point of these commercial comparisons, in assuming that the decisions made to select a commercial cloud provider are identical to select a provider for hosting your data, for doing your compute cycles on. It's assuming that these are things that are just commoditized to the point where there is equal solutions there. They're not. I mean, perhaps I don't need to convince most of the people in this room that the decision of research communities to pick infrastructure providers is usually because there isn't a commercial solution available. They need a unique offering, be it network, hardware, storage, whatever, to deal with the scale that they have to provide, and that's not available on the commercial market. You know, the effort that's gone into this study has looked at seeing, if we have a commercial solution, what does it cost to host that in the academic environment? And perhaps that's where we're seeing the sort of the differences in pricing scales that we're seeing. The real question is, a scientist a researcher has a problem they wish to solve. Can that be hosted and solved in a commercial environment? Can that be hosted or solved in a public sector environment? And then what is the cost around that? And I'd be very surprised to see commercial providers coming in at the price point and even with the capability that is needed by many of the research communities.
Well, that would certainly be interesting to experiment with, but is that really possible if we don't really know what it costs, what we're doing right now?
But you assume that the cost is the only answer.
Yes. Right, again, okay. I do believe it's the Commission.
Now that I was challenged, so I would like to say that, of course, the coordination and support actions like e-fiscal, so they are proposed to us, so bottom up, of course, these calls, when they are established, so there are objectives, and then the proposals want to try to address those objectives. We have stated that the economics and finances of e-infrastructures is an important area where we would like to have, let's say, more information to justify establishment and decision making on certain type of research programs that we will be funding. And we do, let's say, use the results of such studies or coordination actions like e-fiscal, whenever those results are good and interesting and pertinent. Of course, you as the, let's say, from the e-infrastructures field, you don't always see the use of those results by us, because they are often embedded, well, they are not visible at all, they are embedded in our internal papers, or when they are visible, so they are embedded in so-called Commission working documents or Commission staff working documents, which are then the justifications for our decision makers to adopt certain communication or recommendation or even regulation.
Okay, so maybe what we can conclude is that it could be nice to know what kind of impact efforts have, and it would be nice to know what it costs. We might want to work on getting some tools for this. It's a strategic question for the e-IRG. Is this something that Europe needs to be able to measure impact and costs? If so, how do we go about it? So we've seen two examples today beginning this question. So we can pick up on this at a strategic level and think more about how and why. Okay, any more questions on this issue, this topic? If not, then I would have to say I'm sorry that the next speaker has become ill. So we will not have a discussion on security and federated security solutions and so forth, which would have been nice, because that's also a very interesting, important strategic topic. So we'll have to skip that one, get back to it at some later workshop probably. But that's fine, because we've gone a bit over time. So I suggest we go for coffee, and in half an hour come back, and then we will hear something more about. I do believe it is indeed a commercial provider of hosting that will put the question: is that a way to go? Then we will have two use cases from what was it? I forget what it was, biology, I think, and astrophysics. Yes, right. Yeah, live.
If we have some extra time, we could. I think because Stephen raised an important question about if the economical aspects are always should be the driving thing in all our exercises, and I think that's a relevant question. And I'm sure there are different views on this, but we tend to be running now, and according to the costs, and that doesn't necessarily provide the answers to what the customer wants, or it doesn't necessarily be the best solution either. But I would like to hear a bit more.
Right. Okay. Well, let's use a few minutes then on live suggestions. Goodmund.
So one comment I could make is I don't see that there's the same motivation in academia as it is in private business for using the cloud. So one of the great motivations I think for private businesses to use the cloud is that you basically go from capital expenses to operational expenses, and that's very useful if you are running a private business. You can avoid these huge capital expenses. But e-infrastructures are publicly funded And I think for something publicly funded, for a politician, the motivation is almost the other way around. There is no positive visibility connected to operational expenses for a politician, whereas for a capital expense, for investing in a big, beautiful HPC center, that creates visibility. It's a huge capital expense, and that's motivating from a political side. It's beneficial. So the argument is the business case, so to say, is completely twisted.
Okay, before we let certainly I have you on the list. I think Stephen was first. Should we let a new one out? I'll skip you because since you've had the word a few times, you will get the chance.
Thank you. Marilyn Legard from European Space Agency. I don't think we should always think that cloud and computing is one-to-one. I mean, there's things you can do on the cloud that you cannot do on other infrastructure, and we have to use the cloud for what it's good for. And it may not be good for everything, but there are some things that cannot be done without the cloud. And in ESA, for example, where we need to have all our scientists around the world, the community around, to access our data, a cloud platform gives us the possibility to create this community, to follow this community, to know what they want and what they need. Unlike when you go to Amazon, they know exactly what you bought, what you've been looking for, what you may like, and they propose you exactly what you need. This is what the cloud is good for. It may not be good for everything, but this does not exist even if you use your in-house environment, and this has not cost. You cannot cost this, but this is absolutely necessary for us. So it's not always apple. I mean, cloud has some capacity that the rest do not have, and if these capacity are useful for you, I think you have to take them into account and maybe not put dollars in front of it because it's something that you cannot compare.
So I'd just like to add that because of the, I'm certainly not saying that publicly funded infrastructure should have a blank check, nor should they be forced to test their cost effectiveness. But I think we do need to recognise that there's a whole range of technologies that the public sector use to deliver their e-infrastructure the same way as the commercial sector can use to deliver their commercial infrastructure. And we in the public sector need to recognise the changes in technology, the emergence of the cloud, and see how that can help us deliver cost-effective facilities to serve the needs of the researchers. Just delivering cost-effective facilities in itself is of no good to anyone unless we have people who can do what they need to do on them.
Okay, so we conclude that possibly we need to go for an academic solution, possibly we need to look for a private solution, but it would in any case be nice to know if things work and what they cost, right? Okay, Leif, you want to keep it going?
Yeah. I'm now in between the coffee and Julia. So, I would like to go back to Pekka a bit with the responsibility of the Commission or somebody else. I don't know whom, but I have the feeling in a way that I've been around quite a long, and I can see other people who have been around quite long as well, and there's a lot of information, knowledge which has been gathered, and I don't see it coming up in statistics. It's or it's not stored anywhere in a way. I can understand, Pekka, that some things certainly come up in the different work and recommendations from the Commission, but there should be really statistics on the e-infrastructure as well. And I don't see it really. I don't see a place for where I could pull that kind of information, which we would need now. And I'm not talking about the cost numbers as the only numbers. There are lots of other numbers. The networking people have been perhaps doing it a bit more cleverly, so there is a lot of knowledge in the Terera compendium, but immediately when you go over to the HPC or grid computing or cloud computing today, I don't see really a place from where you could pull out the information. And I don't see the Commission building up this infrastructure either for storing this. So it's just disappearing again. So in 10 years' time, there will be new projects again financed by the Commission doing the same thing, and somebody like me would be complaining that the data just evaporates. But I mean, I think this is a waste of resources and money.
So maybe we need some kind of like the OECD or the World Bank continuous statistics.
We can use what is in our environment. The biggest enemy of national academic research network were the monopolistic telecom operator in Europe, and then there was a time and place to put regulator in each country, and then this regulator in each country do every quarterly well, something like statistics of penetration of broadband, internet, etc., etc. And each and every ISP must deliver this information. So basically, what we now can expect is that, for example, Danish e-infrastructure corporation, new company, will collect all information regarding e-infrastructure in Denmark. And we can expect similar happen in all European countries, in all member states. So at the European level, there will be just a single point that will collect information from national point of contact. What we should discuss is this national point of contact. This should be reliable sources of information. And if you have a clever government that is responsible for each cent in euro, then this government should have a knowledge base of research infrastructure and every element of this infrastructure. So basically, it's very simple.
But is the problem not that the ones who are supposed to provide this information basically don't have an interest in doing so? Because why would they want any competition or be out of jobs?
Yes, but publicly paid infrastructure.
I think we are losing track of the user. I think Stephen pointed out very correctly that we have commodity services and we have things that the market doesn't deliver. And we do need some of these services that don't exist. I think there we should focus our attention. As soon as it is a commodity, the tendering will solve your cost issues. You will just define what you want and you take the cheapest offer. If it is not a commodity, you have to organize your users, join forces, and jointly go to your funding authorities, to the Commission or whatever, and say, this is what we need, otherwise we can't do our work. Please help us create this. And then the market will follow afterwards and say, there's a demand for that, it's possible. They do it and they have the economy of scale, and then the commodity will outperform your own initiatives again. And this cycle goes on and on. And we should not try to intervene, as Ivan said, by creating monopolies, because that will kill all your innovation, whether it's the PTTs or yourself.
But Keith, now that monopolies exist already, it's not a matter of creating them, they exist.
Get rid of them.
Get rid of them.
Yeah. And that the way to do that is to show that they are not serving your needs and that you need something else. And then you can get support to get your own solution, and then they will learn that their solution is no longer feasible, and they will adapt, hopefully, or die.
But you will not get support from the monopoly in doing this.
No, but as Ivan said, you don't have to join forces with monopolies because they just want to sell what they have on their terms, and you have to define your terms as a user.
Right. Empowering the user, we've heard that one. Okay, any more? Suggestions, comments, questions? No? Should we then close this this session on measuring impact and costs and so on? Okay, I suggest so. Let's go for coffee.